Lovely. All right, good afternoon everybody, and really nice to be speaking to you live from my own office. This is the weirdest thing, isn't it? We're all working from home, so I can see all of you at home rather than usually I'm seeing people in youth centres and everything else, so it's a different experience for all of us. I'm going to be talking about something today that is the most massive topic, okay? So in an hour and a half, I want to make it quite clear right from the start. There is no way I can cover everything, but I'm hoping to have a pretty good crack at covering what I can. And I'll point you off to other places to look for other things as well. So I'm going to cover the basics. What I'll do is I'll share with you my screen. I'm going to try and make it as interactive as possible, because even only though it's only an hour and a half long, just listening to me with a little presentation is going to be, you know, it's quite hard going, I think. So I'm going to try and make it as interactive as possible. I really like delivering this stuff. And it's based on the back of the fact that I've done loads of anger management groups for young people. Started off when, so if anybody who doesn't know me, let's do that bit. So I'm Vanessa Rogers. I'm a youth worker first and foremost. And I'm a writer, I'm a trainer, but I go back every year and do at least 3 months working with young people. My background is I've only ever really worked in projects and work with young people that are seen as vulnerable or high risk. I was a manager, a senior manager for Hertfordshire for quite a large multi-agency team, and our team was the preventative wing of the youth offending team. So we were looking at using youth work, identifying young people early on, and a lot of this stuff, my interest in this comes from there. So we were all trained. If people are a bit of a buff like me and like to go off and have a look into it, it's calling on two things. So one is something called therapeutic crisis intervention. And that is, it's an American thing, but it is used a lot in young offenders institutes and also in residential settings. So what we did was we took the principles of it and used it around youth work, because we don't, you know, unless we're on a residential, we're not trying to get young people into bed or up in the morning. That's not what we do. And the other thing is based on the basic principles of cognitive behaviour therapy. So what it's not is a psychology. I'm not a psychologist. I have a psychology A level, but I ain't a psychologist. I'm a youth worker. So hopefully, let me show you this. What I'm hoping to do is to give you some stuff that will be interesting and ways that youth work can support young people who are really experiencing, I think, a really traumatic time, as are all of us. But hopefully in a minute, you'll be able to see my screen. Can people see the screen? Let's make it large. Can everybody? Yeah, okay. So that's what we're looking at. What I'm hoping to get across over in these, as I say, I'm always over ambitious. So I'm going to do my best here, and hopefully you'll come along with me for the ride. So we're going to look at a wider understanding of anger and aggression in young people. This is based on some of the principles of the stuff I was talking about. And for me, it clicked a load of thoughts that I thought, oh, once I understand those principles, then a lot of the work that I do falls into place. Going to look at how lockdown stress impacts on behaviour. We're going to look at some of those triggers, and also about the importance of emotional literacy to express how you feel. If you don't have the words for how you feel, then it is easy to identify it all as anger. And also look at ways that youth workers can help young people to build those skills. It's about self-regulating. Some people seem to be born with it. They're really good at managing their emotions and expressing how they feel. Other people, not so much. But if you have those tools, it can really help you to help yourself, because ultimately that's what we're about, isn't it? Youth work is about giving people the skills, the tools to go and do it themselves. So it's also based at the beginning of lockdown. I, like a lot of people, was really like, oh my God, you know, this is awful. I wanted to volunteer, I wanted to get involved. But I've been doing a lot of work from home, so my skills weren't really required on the front line. So what I've done is I've written and given out my work free to all the big youth agencies to try and support young people at home. This is the one I've done on this, which is around coping with feelings of anger and frustration. Instead of writing it for youth workers, although you can all adapt it, I've written it directly for young people to use. So it's about a workbook or tools and techniques that they can use themselves to understand their feelings, to explore how they feel about it, and to crack on with it. So as well as this, you know, having a look on YouTube, if you should wish to revisit it, go and get your freebie. You know, there's one there on that, and there's another one I did on mental health, and there's some really good stuff on that website. It's MYA and UK Youth, so it's definitely worth a look. They also have stuff around the research that's being done on young people, anger, and parent domestic abuse. So all of that is your place to go to download stuff to find out more after this. Okay, so before we go any further, actually, we all have 5 basic emotions, and that's where psychologists always start with this. And everything else we express or experience comes off of this. Joy, so that's around your optimism, your happiness, regulates that. Fear, feeling scared, but that is a good thing because it ensures caution and means that you don't go and put yourselves in really dangerous situations. Or you do because you like the feeling, I suppose. Anger, frustration, but it's also the thing, and if you look at things like the Black Lives Matter at the moment, this is really important. People are feeling angry. They have had enough. They're seeing inequalities. They want to do something about it. And they are trying their best to make change. So although anger is often seen as a really negative emotion, it actually spurs you on to do good things too. Disgust is a really human emotion about feeling revolted, but actually it keeps us safe because it makes us know when you shouldn't be eating stuff. You know, most of these are all primeval stuff that we all feel and experience. And sadness, which is all about those feelings of loss, but also it's the bit that clicks the imprints of memories. So sometimes when you look back at memories and that feeling of time being gone past, and you might even cry about a really happy memory, that's all linked to this sadness. So I suppose what I want to say is anger is just another emotion. You know, often it gets a really bad rap. It's seen as the worst emotion, something perhaps we should be embarrassed or ashamed of feeling, but it is no different. There's no hierarchy in these emotions. It's the same. And feeling angry is okay. It's human, it's normal. It's the behaviour that's linked to it that can sometimes be a bit more problematic. So extreme emotions, and they provoke different things, don't they? If you look at this, you've got a picture of a young person crying. And as humans, our response to that tends to be, we empathise, we feel sad, we want to help that person, we want to make them feel better, we want to hear what's upset them. It really touches us to see somebody crying. Even if we see it in a film, it touches you on an emotional level. The other extreme emotion that humans feel, which is anger, you don't get the same response at all. But actually, they're really closely linked. So you can be crying and angry about the same things. But if you're faced with anger, you get punished, actually. You get punished, you get told off, you get told to behave, you get told to stop feeling like that. But you wouldn't say that to somebody who was crying. And we tell people to get a grip. You know, get a grip of yourself. Calm down, we say. If it's somebody crying, totally different. And invalidating emotions like that, in all of us, but specifically in children that have already experienced trauma, actually sets them off, gives them another trauma. It leads to internalising feelings, internalising rage, and I suppose on the far end of that scale, you turn that rage in on yourself and you start self-harming or risky behaviours because it's an extreme emotion you don't know what to do with and you're told to shut it down. So actually, 2 responses, both of which could have been to good old COVID at the moment, to this whole lockdown experience. It's part of our flight or fight. You know, it's the brain's natural perception to there being a perceived threat. And it's a really wide continuum. You know, from being mildly irritated when something doesn't work to an absolute rage. And I often ask young people, I get them to do me like a thermometer of mild irritation to absolutely about to blow your top. And where's the point along that where you can no longer control it? Because actually most people, you know, there is a moment. just before, and you decide to go for it or not, and then we can talk coping skills. So we shouldn't be punished for the emotion. We can be, you know, the behavior can be unacceptable, all those things, but actually this is around not stopping people feeling angry. And I don't ever call it anger management, because I don't like that term. It sounds like I'm telling people that how they're feeling is wrong and that I am going to control their emotions. That's not what it is about at all. It's about giving young people tools, tips, techniques, being able to recognize those feelings in themselves, name them, and actually express it. Talking out rather than acting out is the little buzzword in the old therapeutic crisis intervention. Because actually, what do you get from being angry? Well, actually, you get quite a lot. You get an emotional release. Think about, and I've already used the analogy of crying, but when you've cried or when you have been really, really angry, actually the feelings, so the primary emotion might be anger, but the secondary emotion can be release, it can be relief, it can be tiredness, it can be all those things that you get off, the same as when you've cried. You get your voice hurt, you know, and I love that picture there of the young woman carrying the banner, I'm too young to be this angry. For me, that kind of sums it up, and that was all around the Me Too movement. You get self-expression, you get to say what you think, what you feel. Now, there is another side to anger where people are using their anger to have power over others, and that is slightly, or getting what you want, you know. And certainly if we were looking at this on a wider course, we'd look at starting point of how do children learn. Well, if you've got a toddler who, and if you haven't got a toddler or ever had one, you've probably seen one, when they want something and you say no, they absolutely go for it. You get a flooding of emotions, they fling themselves about the place, and you have a decision to make. Now, you can either give in and give them what they want, or you can decide that's not going to happen and you do all of that stuff. If you learn that you get what you want by shouting and shrieking, and it's working for you as a toddler, and then it works for you as a 9-year-old, by the time you get to 9, 10, 11, you start being labelled perhaps as an angry child or an aggressive behaviour. But often, in my experience, practice experience, I'd go to houses and the first thing I'd look at when I arrived in that house is, who has the power here? And often, and not always the male, but often it was the 15-year-old young man who sits on that sofa, lays on it, holds on to the remote control to show he's in charge, issuing his orders. And when you say to maybe to his parents or carers, well, you know, what happens if you try and stop that? They'll say, oh, I don't like to stop. No, you can't, because he goes mad. He smashes the door up. You know, I've seen some very interesting decorations around the house where young people have, you know, gone out. It's around using your anger, your personal power to intimidate others. That is slightly different. It is anger, but it's a different form of anger. And it's about, you know, getting space around you. People tend to move away from you when you are really angry, because who wants to get caught in that crossfire? Okay, lockdown anger. Now, I think that this is really interesting, because when you think about it, as a punishment, we take away people's liberty. That's what the criminal justice system is. If you do something really, really wrong, you are punished by being taken away from wherever you are put somewhere, you have to stay there. You lose your liberty. Now, lockdown has effectively meant that everybody's lost their liberty, but we haven't done anything wrong, you know? So there is that feeling of we've lost our freedom, we've lost our right to go and do what we normally do. Alongside that, we've lost the structure of our day. You know, we might moan about going to work or going to school, but for the most part, everybody has a sort of structure to their day, don't they? And you've lost that. Everything that made the world as you know it has changed. Is it really surprising that people feel angry and are feeling anxious? I think a lot of young people feel angry, they feel frustrated because they are stuck somewhere and they can't do it. So, you know, there is a lot of difference. You can't choose who you're with either. Similar to prison, you are with who you are with. And for a lot of young people, you know, think back to being a teenager yourself. How much time did you actually spend on famille, chatting away, and, you know, parents have said to me, oh, I've got out the Monopoly and they're not even interested. I've tried to do family films and they don't want to know. It's like, well, actually, it's all new, isn't it? That's not how people live their lives. Some do, you know. It's not surprising that all those emotions are running high in everybody else. And as well as that, for young people, the loss of their peers, which, as we know, as youth workers, adolescent development, the thing that shapes you most as a person in your teenage years is not your family. It is, they put in all that groundwork and it comes out again in, you know, in all different ways, but it's your peers, it's your friends, it's the people that you spend your time with, the people that are really important to you, that ground you, that give you all those things, and we've taken that away. So they are stuck at home with parents who are also experiencing loss of liberty, who are also experiencing a big change, and for some of them are really worried about what's that life going to look like at the other side. Am I still going to have a job? You know, people trying to juggle. So all in all, it is a recipe for lockdown anger. So it's not surprising there's been such a lot of talk about it. Plus the fact, in adolescence, the adult brain, teenage brain, works differently to adult brains because the right side of the brain hasn't fully developed. And that's the bit, along with all those hormonal changes, that puts inside the brakes, if you like, slows down, enables you to experience your emotions and to make sense of the world. So it needs to be more intense for young people. If you think back to being a teenager yourself, staying up all night watching horror movies with your friends, for some of you, it's about being scared and thrilled and getting that rush off of that. Those huge fairground rides, which as a young person you might be quite happy to get on. As an adult, you might not quite be quite so keen to do them. You don't need that thrill that mixes with rage, fear, aggression, and the impulse control and the planning ahead, the consequences. None of that is in place yet. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. We know that in adolescence, it doesn't end. For young women, it's about 22. For young men, it's about 24 when their brain fully forms. So actually, we're asking people to do things that they're not really capable of doing. We have an adult expectation. And when people don't behave how we want them to, we see them as selfish and self-absorbed and self-obsessed. Yes, that's the point of adolescence. That's what happens to the teenage brain. So, you know, it's difficult. I do get it. So there are two types of anger. This is the anger we're seeing a lot, I think, at the moment, is the reactive anger. So it's about, you know, something happens, a trigger happens, and there is that pushes your emotions and your behaviour. So it's the most common form of aggression. It's that loss of emotional control and flooding. It's that where people just seem to lose their words, they may be tearful, all those things. It's not goal motivated. That is proactive anger, and that's the kind of anger when we looking at people who are trying to manipulate a situation or dominate somebody else through their personal power. That's
really
that
good
kind
at
of
this.
anger.
Done some training.
Oh, hello. Got a voice there coming through. So, for example, we see in movies, if we look at movie land, we see that kind of proactive anger is acted out by, you know, Scarface or the gangster, or even Phil Mitchell in EastEnders, who says very slowly, that's my Phil Mitchell, very quietly, I'm going to hurt you. It's not personal, it's just business. And you know they mean it because they're not really angry. What they are is using that aggression to get something, and it is very different to that kind of whoa, goes up, bang, that kind of anger. Okay, and of course anger can also be a substitute emotion. You know, you might be seeing anger, but that mask, that's not the actual emotion. Anger's the secondary emotion in this, but it's the most acceptable face of it. Going to put you into groups because I just want you to have a quick chat about what I've said and that. So it can be a substitute emotion. You choose to show anger, but actually it's other stuff. And I think in lockdown, a lot of, you know, young people getting angry and shouting masks other things that are going on. So you've got 10 minutes and you know, we're being really ambitious here. We'll see if it works. And if it doesn't, then we won't be able to do breakout rooms again, but we'll try our best here. So what I'm going to ask you to do is we're going to get to talk to your colleagues, which is lovely. Say hello to them. Why might young people? What other emotions? Why are they hiding them? And if you can just write down 2 or 3 for your group and just decide who's going to do it. But somebody, when you come back out of your group, types it into the space bar. Okay, we'll see how we get on from there. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Sarah, this is your moment. Drum roll for Sarah. She's going to put you into groups and I'll see you in a minute on the other side. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So what other emotions might people be hiding? Did people write it up, or have we got some feedback there so that I can see? Who's going to...
We haven't got any feedback in the chat.
Huh?
We haven't got any feedback in the chat as yet. So we might need someone to
Okay,
feedback.
well, I might start picking on people because I don't want to be dragging on this forever. Hang on. Okay, well, let's just carry on.
Well, we sort of named a few of the emotions, some of the feelings. We were saying things like uncertainty, boredom, fear, loss, pain, and then we were trying to qualify those feelings as well. So a lot of it was centered around lockdown and like a lot of the feelings that young people can have during lockdown. And a lot of that was around inconsistency of messages. One of our colleagues is from Wales, and she said that the young people in Wales are being told different things from the young people in England. And they,
True.
yeah.
And Scotland too. I was working with Scotland last week, Dumfries, and I've trained there loads over the years, and they were still in full lockdown, and it felt very different because we weren't, you know, we'd started having those changes. So definitely, but for me, it's about why is it that young people will choose anger to show that rather than masking those other emotions, and will rather present anger, even though it's an emotion that they're told is wrong, or that they need to go to anger management classes, or they're told to get a grip, or all those things. Well, for some of them, I mean, did you get that far?
No, I think we didn't quite get that far, no.
Okay, no worries. I've got some answers. I was hoping they were going to chime with yours, but that's not a problem. So let's move on a bit. So certainly I think there's some gender differences here. So for young men, often anger is seen as a safe response. It's one almost that they're allowed to feel, to be angry, to be shouty, to be, it's considered masculine. To say I'm scared, or I'm anxious, or I'm worried about the future, sometimes it's easier just to show that you are angry. They may want to cry, but what do we say to young men? I mean, it's 2020. I'd love to say that we say that's fine. And so, you know, obviously some people do, and that's great. But there's still that stuff around being a crybaby. They might be the oldest the oldest child in a family, and they've got to show a role model to the rest of the children, put a brave face on, you know, boys don't cry, all that stuff. And actually, when you start to look around you, that's kind of validated by, certainly if you've looked at the news across this weekend, all you've seen is a face of screaming, angry people. Not all male, obviously. It's important, I think, that we see that anger, but we accept that that isn't always what people are feeling, and and even if it is the primary emotion is anger, the secondary emotion is just as important, and that might be fear, concern, anxiety, whatever it might be, because otherwise we're missing whole chunks there. With young women, well, it is slightly different. You know, young women are often rewarded for being nice, for coping. You know, I think there's been a lot of talk of women coping wonderfully within this crisis. And it's also linked. If you get angry and really shout and really say how you feel, there are links to notions of being a little bit unstable, you know, that it's not very safe. Or even worse, you're seen as nagging. And it's not nagging. You are, if you keep asking somebody the same, when can I go back to school? Well, what's going to happen about my GCSEs? Well, stop nagging, you know. And when women cry, and young men too, often that's when conflict happens, that you see the signals, you see the crying, but actually that isn't because somebody's sad or unhappy. It's because they are so angry. It's that emotional flooding again, that they don't know what to do with those feelings or where to go with it. So there is a kind of difference between it. But the main thing about anger management that across the whole board is that anger, and this is an equation that you're always given to start from, anger equals unmet need. Now, that doesn't mean to say that that need is right. I put out to you, hopefully you all got it, because I know a few people have texted me. Yes, of course, I should have said it. I'm really sorry. I was so delighted to see everybody. Forgot to say, I will send you these round, so you got the slides. And on them, you will see my notes underneath. So anything I haven't said will be there too. I've also deliberately put in links to all the bits and pieces. So hopefully it'll be useful rather than just looking at it thinking, oh yeah, put that in the drawer. So, what do people think of that emotion, that equation? Anger equals unmet need. First question when we're looking at behaviour is, okay, if we turn that round, instead of seeing the anger, we see the anger, but we look at what's the need that's not been met in. It's a different response, isn't it? As I say, it doesn't mean to say that what you want is always justified. You know, I'd like a new car and a pay rise, but I ain't going to get it. So, and I'm not actually, there's no reason why I should get it any more than anybody else. Still an unmet need. But it is the starting point for any talk about anger. So we look at the person, we look at what's actually happening in that life. Is it that they haven't spoken to anybody who's the same age of them for ages? Is it about, they're having to share things that they don't normally share things? They've got no space of their own and there is nowhere for them just to go and sort their head out. And equally, they're worried about upsetting parents who they also know is trying hard. So I think that it's really interesting, and that's the main thing I wanted to look at. But I think I was going to put you back into those groups, but I'm really worried about doing it again. So let's see how we can do it. I'm going to look at the triggers in isolation and ask around what we think is currently triggering the angry responses in young people, and what do you think are the main triggers for parents and carers? Now, I think a lot of the stuff we probably know about triggering angry responses as young people, and I'd be really great if you could put your thing up and tell us about the young people you're working with. Don't all have to do it, but that would be great. So if people want to speak or they want to say something, put your thumb up. I think for a lot of young people, the life as they know it has changed. The things that they were looking forward to, maybe their proms, they're saying goodbye to people without any kind of ceremony about it. They feel they're missing out. Talking to young people, one said to me, I am wasting what should be the best year of my life. And I am being forced to spend it inside. And I'm not sure how you would cope with that. And I'm not sure how I would have done back then. That feeling of marking time, all the things that you thought were going to happen, the music festivals that are maybe the first ones you've ever been allowed to go to, all those firsts that might be happening. So the first thing that happened was that young people went, yay, no school, excellent, we've got extra holidays. And possibly people thought that about work as well, like, yeah, great, we're going to get extra time off. But that doesn't last very long, does it? Before you start thinking, okay, but that also means I can't do this. Now, interestingly, and I've done parent work. It's not my real love, but certainly I've done quite a lot with foster carers training, And in the first few weeks of lockdown, I was asked to do parent workshops and foster care workshops. And the main triggers for them are totally different. So the triggers are around things that parents seem to be getting very aerated about, or they won't get up. So I'm telling them to get up. I've got teenagers, they're lying in their bed till 1 o'clock in the afternoon and they won't get up. And my response is, what are you asking them to get up for? You know, if it's to help with the cleaning or look after the kids, or what incentive is there? It's not their problem, is it? So a lot of the problems, the triggers that for parents and carers around practicalities, around they're eating me out of house and home, they won't do as they're told. And those were the early days. They won't, you know, I've wanted to put on things they're not interested in doing it. Then we came to, well, actually, I'm not sure I can keep them in for lockdown anymore. I'm asking them to stay in, but after 3 or 4 weeks, it's too long to be away from your peers, maybe your relationship. And young people were saying, my mum's not taking that seriously. I see my boyfriend every day. I am used to seeing them every day. I haven't seen them, apart from on a screen, for 6 weeks or 5 weeks. And they don't take that seriously. You know, saying to parents, have you thought about that? Oh, you know, almost this idea of, well, you know, it's not like they're going to be together forever. It's a teenage, you know, but that's not how young people are feeling. It's really important to them to see the people that give them the main support that they get. So triggers around for parents seem to be around laying down of rules and people not responding to them, arguments over devices, and, you know, the stuff around sharing, arguments about space, about if they share a bedroom with a sibling, about how that space is managed. So for a lot of parents and carers, it's about trying to get them to do things that they don't want to do. It's about trying to assert your will to get people to do things they don't want to do. Whereas I think young people, a lot of it's, I think frustration is a better description of the word. And that frustration at being stuck inside, missing things, nobody really listening to them is the main triggers. So when we look at anger theory, they say that there are 6 main triggers for anger. And they call them trigger threats. So they're the things that make people, trigger people to feeling anger on that big continuum. So the unknown, what's going to happen, not knowing what's going to happen, really destabilizes people. You know, we don't like it. Even if we think we're wild and free, we kind of like to know what's going to happen in the end, and we don't. Loss of control, loss of power over our own choices, our own destinies, what we choose to spend our time on. Rejection. You know, it's not a nice feeling, and it triggers, it's not, I'll show you why it triggers those things. Isolation, being away from people, failure, death and loss. Now, if they're the main 6 trigger threats for anger, frustration and rage, how many of those does the current COVID-19 situation trigger? Actually, it hits all of them. You know, so is it surprising? No. Those are, any of those trigger people. We've got all of them at the same time. You know, I know that it's become almost a bit trite, that stuff that we hear people saying, unprecedented times. But it is, isn't it? None of us know what to do because none of us have had to do this before. So Bernardo's has done a bit of research, and I've put, when I send you the things, you can have a look at it because I've put the link on the show notes. What's that? I've been listening to too many podcasts. So Bernardo's lockdown, they were asking around the main reasons that young people were struggling. And this was around helping teenagers stay at home during lockdown. And they were saying it's the main reasons they struggled with the whole thing and were struggling to adhere to the rules that the government had outlined. The top one was around that social contact. And I don't think we know that. And a lot of youth workers, I was talking to Mandy actually about the youth work tea breaks that the MYA is hosting, where we all, youth workers from all over the country, 30 at a time, Tuesday morning, 45 minutes, we talk stuff. That is the main thing that's coming out across the regions, is that they're trying to find, whether it's digital youth work or detached youth work, is around finding ways to get that peer support going and to get young people actually having some social contact. And there's been some really interesting, fun things. People were talking to me about things like they were doing an online pet show. So literally you dress your pet up, you show them, and then there's a judge. Art exhibition where everybody puts their own art up. Bingo, all sorts of quizzes and all sorts of ways that youth workers are finding to be creative to kind of give that back. Like a personal space. And I think for young people, certainly talking to foster carers, I've been talking to them about the importance of having somewhere that is yours. If you have learnt to manage your anger by getting away, you know, that's a great gift if you can give that to young people, that they have learnt that when they get really, really angry, and in some schools they do that time out or whatever else, that they can spend time alone. You can't do that if you are stuck in 3 rooms. So it's about how can you try and just give them the space to get away. Family arguments, getting whipped up into that, and that constant low level arguing that's going on. Too much focus on schoolwork. Too many people telling you you've got to do you've got to do it online, you must get online, you must do the stuff they've sent home. Or worrying about missing it. They're not sending me enough. Nobody's sending me any stuff. Personal relationships we've talked about. And actually the fact that they say, we're not affected by COVID. We're not going to catch it. And if we do, we won't get it that bad. But we have really had our lives changed because of it. And that's not fair. And of course, there's the stuff around risks at home as well, which for us may be the majority of our young people. Certainly, in other places in the wider world, that came quite low down. But I would suspect for a lot of young people that youth workers work with, we are those young people that are higher risk. So other triggers, these are the stuff that young people have said is about that fear of rejection, alcohol, drugs. Some young people who perhaps are used to using cannabis on a regular basis, but may not be able to get to it during lockdown. And that's actually having an impact on their mood. Feelings of shame, inadequacy, all those things, mainly that they say parents are making them feel, about constantly being told off, about constantly being feeling that you don't measure up. So all those things. But you know what? The problem is that for every young person that's feeling that, parents are feeling that too. And you, as well as having young people who are not good at regulating their emotions, you've got parents who have never learnt those skills either. So they have no words for that anger, and they don't understand what they're feeling. If you don't understand what you're feeling and you can't put a name to it, how can you express and talk about it and be able to self-soothe, is the word they use, psychologist term. I'm always a bit uncomfortable with that term, but it's they self-soothe, to be able to make yourself feel better. But often you've got parents who actually are in the same kind of emotional turmoil as their young people and are just as bad as expressing it. Okay, so then last looked at what the additional vulnerabilities are, and actually the home vulnerabilities then come on top of that. So we're getting a whole layer of things that are happening that are leading up to anger, outrage, and the rest of it, and even violence. Because we all learn how to show our feelings from the people around us. You know, the basics of educations are that children learn what they live. So if you see arguments are always sorted out at home with fists, or if you see that people shriek and shout and scream at each other, that's kind of what you do too. And sometimes that's fine. Lots of big families. I come from a really big family, and people are always amazed coming into our family how loud we all are. Well, that's because when you're in a big family, you have to shout, otherwise you're not heard. It's not aggression, it's the fact your voice will just get lost and you won't get your say. So we all talk extra fast, all my brothers and sisters, we talk too fast and we talk too loud. And it's about, finding your place. Additionally, things like young parents who are worried that they can't afford to pay for the home that they're living in. You know, this is putting a lot of economic pressure on people. That all ends up as a pressure cooker. Other factors, young people, what they felt like in the first place. You know, actually, they might not have been in great shape before this even started, in terms of feeling happy and jolly at home. Those critical inner voices that people have that are telling them you're not good enough, that, you know, you can't do stuff, unhelpful, intruding thoughts. Some of this, obviously, if this is too much, needs to be, it's not around youth work can support it, but actually our role might well be around enabling signposting to other services like CAMS or a counsellor to sort some of this stuff out. But also around the environment, because when you get angry, you have some physiological changes as well. As we talked about the fight or flight, your blood starts pumping around your body to get you ready to either fight them off or to you know, do whatever you're going to do, run away as fast as you can. If you are in a room, you know, we've had hot weather, you've got hot weather, hot houses, nowhere to get outside of, all of that mirrors that temperature rise when you're angry. What are you watching? The audio-visual stuff. Yes, there's arguments for and against as to whether watching lots and lots of aggressive and games and gaming or films actually impacts on people's behaviour. Jury's out on that. You can read one report that says it doesn't, and read one that says it does. I think it's more around that compulsiveness to it, that young people, certainly parents, were saying they'll ask a young person to come off a fortnight and they won't come off, and that is an argument, and it causes big arguments. And young people feeling really angry that they're being asked to take their eyes away from stuff. You know, what have we got here that's giving hope and meaning to life? What are we telling them the future's going to be like? As well as not sleeping particularly well. All those things all contribute. So that when we look at young people in anger, it's not about, oh yeah, they're all kicking off, they've been really angry, it's aggressive behaviour, there's been violence in the family. Actually, I'm looking at that. Obviously, if there's violence, the police need to be called. That's not okay. I'm not advocating violence. What I'm saying is we need to look underneath as well about the stages that have brought somebody to that place. Because actually, if you're already angry because your parents had told you they're going to divorce, or you haven't done very well in school, or things that you have no control over, then something else that you have no control over, the pandemic, all of that is impacting. So when you're asked to clean your bedroom or come downstairs for dinner and you go absolutely mental, and parents will say, it came out of nowhere. I asked them perfectly civilly, I said, please come down for your dinner, and they went mad. Well, that isn't what's happened. There's been a whole load of stuff that's happened beneath that, leading up to that point. That trigger, and it went. So actually, it's around helping young people to identify where those triggers are. And I'll show you that bit in a minute. So the other bit I want to show you is around, this is a crisis stress model, okay? This is when you are most likely to be hit or assaulted. So it works for when we're working with young people too. But you've got your pre-crisis stress. Now, remember, that might be, at the moment, it's heightened because of COVID. It's been stuck inside. People are getting out a bit more now. But it's that pre-crisis state. So everybody's on edge. Then there is agitation, aggression going up to here. Now, the place that you are most likely to be assaulted, obviously at the top, you can see it coming, violence. It is between the escalation phase and the outburst stage, somewhere about halfway between the two. But the other place is the recovery phase. So going down the other side. Now, to get you from being absolutely top angry, down to base level how you were at the start, and that adrenaline to have gone down, can take for some people up to 45 minutes. So somebody poking their head round the door 10 minutes later after you've stropped off to say, I thought I told you, come downstairs. That is going to reignite that argument in seconds. We don't give people enough time to calm down. And we all know that if you're a bit angry, even quite a lot angry, and just thinking about it can make you angry again. You can re-hitch yourself back to those feelings, and it only takes another little tap on that pain or that aggression that sets you off again. It can fester inside. So what do we need to do about it? Well, key messages about growing up and, you know, invalidating emotions, telling people that they're wrong or that they, you know, shouldn't be feeling that. We need good role models for conflict resolution, which I think youth workers can offer. I'm just going to check on my times here. Whoa, it's going ever so fast. It's 4 minutes past 3. Oh my goodness. So the other thing I wanted to show you, some of you might have seen it. I wouldn't show it except for the fact it's 3 minutes and it can show you quicker than I can tell you. It's something else you might want to have a look at. Some of you may have already seen, is around this ACEs. So adverse childhood experiences. Done loads of work on Wales with youth workers, and also the Meta doing training on this around domestic abuse and trying to break that cycle. So I'm going to show you because it tells it quicker than I can.
My parents don't understand. All the drinking and fighting means I'm scared. I'd like a cuddle, perhaps a bedtime story, but mostly I'd like them to stop shouting at me, and sometimes they hit me. Feeling scared every day and not feeling loved or wanted will change me for the rest of my life. Later, I'll have problems at school, problems with alcohol, and I'll get in trouble with the police. What's happening to me right now means I'm more likely to have serious health problems in middle age and die sooner than I should. Doctors say my life is full of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. But in my world, this means I see my dad hitting my mum. Dad's got a drinking problem, and mum's always crying, even with the tablets. I am always being shouted at and hit. After the booze and fags, there's not a lot of money for toys or clothes, or even food. I'm getting used to being scared all the time. Now I'm just angry. Doctors say things are changing inside me. My brain isn't learning how to control my feelings properly. My body can't relax like those kids who don't have ACEs, so my body won't be able to repair itself properly when I get older, making it more likely I'll get cancer or heart disease as an adult. It hurts when my parents hit me, but the real damage is hidden, and that damage will be with me for life.
I drink and smoke. They say I'm out of control, but I'm not. It's just my way of coping with my ACEs. I've been in plenty of fights, but what's wrong with that? Kids' punches don't hurt half as much as when my dad hits me. I beat up a kid last week at school because he looked at me weird. Who cares? I ended up with more time out of school. Learning's not for me anyway, and the teachers don't care any more than my parents. I don't like the way anyone looks at me except my girl. She's 16 and pregnant, just like my mum was with me.
So this is where I've ended up. I've got diabetes and cancer's probably on the way. I know these kill you, but I couldn't do without them. I've never had a proper job and I've spent time inside. I hate my kids. I hate their mum too, until she left. So my kids have grown up with ACEs. And now my daughter had her first kid. She's 16. The course of my life was set in the wrong direction a long time ago. I know where I'm heading, and sadly I know where my kids are heading too. This doesn't have to happen. A little help in childhood makes a big difference to where life takes you. When I was a baby, the nurses noticed that my mum wasn't coping and helped her and explained how important my childhood is to the rest of my life. So, with a bit of help, she coped. The police came round after next door complained about the noise from mum and dad fighting. They asked how I was feeling. I told them I was scared all the time. Mum and dad got help. The shouting got better and the hitting stopped. I even got some bedtime stories. I still had problems at school, but the teacher asked me about what was happening at home. I got help controlling my feelings. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. I'm now married with 2 children and I've got a job most of the time. I haven't repeated the same problems with my kids. We got help when being a parent got too much. Our children are ACE-free, and that means their kids stand a good chance of growing up ACE-free as well. Almost half the people in England and Wales experienced 1 ACE as a child, and 1 in 10 of us suffered 4 or more ACEs. If we stop ACEs, millions of children would not become smokers or binge drinkers, and levels of violence in adults would be cut in half. Fewer ACEs in childhood also means fewer adults developing diseases like cancer, heart disease, and diabetes in middle age. We all need to be ACE aware. Are you? Doctors, police, nurses, teachers, firefighters, and most importantly, parents. The more you know about ACEs, the more you can help stop children growing up with ACEs in their lives. And for those of you who have already suffered ACEs, the more you know, the more you can help yourself and others who have suffered ACEs cope.
Okay, I mean, that is a fairly simplistic view, but a lot of service, it makes the points, I think, really well. That children learn what they see. Certainly it can be, I see youth workers in there amongst those people that can really make a difference. Because the things that don't help, and you know, we'll look at the negative ways of conflict resolution. These are often the ways that parents have either experienced themselves or what we see around us, or maybe even just how they've always done it, but they aren't going to get you basically what you want. It's not going to give you the reaction you want. So when differences arise, it's about attempting to prove who's right. You know, that we probably all know somebody who will just keep on and on and on, trying to prove who they're right, bagging things together. So you're not just telling them off for the one thing they haven't done. You're saying, I keep telling you to get up in the morning and you won't get up, and I've told you to do your homework, and actually last week I told you, you know, that you are always being told off for the same things. Why would you get anything but anger back? You know, resentment, frustration, all those things. Lying to get your own way, personal attacking, starting to look at, you know, hitting on children on their weak bits, or perhaps young people, shaming them, making them feel bad about themselves because you believe deep down that you should have control. You are the adult. There are winners, and that'll be you, and there are losers, and that will be your child. In any circumstance, that isn't always the best way to help people. And certainly we know that this personal attacking and shaming and all those things actually go really deep. Because what do we tell people? We say, oh, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. Now, as youth workers, we know that's not true. You know, you think all of us, even the most confident, there'll be that thing that was said to you, and you poke that little bit and you're back there. It takes you back there instantly in a way that violence doesn't in a lot of ways. So actually thinking about what's being said, it can be really aggressive. Personal space, what we tend to do, humans mirror each other. So when we are, our engagement with each other is around communication. So it's not just about the words we're saying, but if you watch next time you're in the youth centre or whatever, have a look at people who are talking to each other. After a while, if you are really engaged in communicating with that person, you'll notice your body language, you start mirroring each other. In conflict, if you don't really hang on to yourself and make a big effort not to do it, you find yourself mirroring that person. So if that person gets cross with you and takes a step forward, and then that person squares up to you and you're doing it back. And if you're not careful, they aren't listening, you step forward. You're not understanding, they step forward. You step forward, they step forward. And the only place to go is get out of my space, get out of my face. And certainly around helping young people understand what that is. We can't do it in COVID world, but often I'll do it with a group within a room. I get half of them to line up over the other side, half to line up over the other. A's and B's, it doesn't matter. Ones and twos, no value statement on that. When I clap my hands, A's, walk towards your partner on the B side. B, when they get to you and they're close enough to be uncomfortable, put your hand up. That means stop. And A's, you have to stop. And they'll instantly see that people have different personal space. And we all know it. If somebody steps into your personal space, because it's that feeling of uncomfortableness, it almost crackles because they are just too close. I then do it the other way round. And after they've all done their hand up, I say, right, take a step forward. And so they experience that feeling in a safe environment. But we tell young people, you know, get out of my face. You're invading my personal space. If you don't understand what that means, how can you do that? You know? And as you can see in the picture, I thought it was the perfect. They are mirroring each other. Both of them are think they're right. They are both arguing from the point of being justified. Justifiable rage. You haven't done it. You're not listening. You get louder and louder and louder. And then you say things like, don't speak to me like that. Stop shouting. You hear people saying, while shouting very loud themselves, what? Are you stupid? I've told you 5 times. Or you will do as you're told. And it doesn't work. You know, it doesn't, it's perceived as aggressive. It is aggressive. So it's around keeping that space. If you want to be heard, keeping calm, taking it back rather than direct orders. They don't work either. So if I'm in a youth centre and let's give a classic example. So I say it's time to go home. And a young person says, I don't want to go home. And I say, well, come on, you know, it's time to go home. I'm shutting the doors. I'm locking it. You have to stay here all night. And they say, I don't care. And I say, right, get out. That's it. Get out. And they say, no. And then I say, well, get up. Go on. Get out. And they say, make me. And all the other young people are watching. So I've now got an audience all watching to see how I'm going to handle that situation. Who created that situation? I did. I created that situation by directly ordering something I couldn't possibly enforce. Doesn't work. And if you keep saying it in a home situation and you're constantly telling people what to do, you do as you're told, they just stick like the dog has stuck his fingers in the air. La, la, can't hear you. What? Nobody's listening. It ceases to have meaning. It doesn't work. So other things that don't work is telling people, you make me angry. When you do that, you make me. No, name it. I feel angry. I feel angry because, and when that happens, I feel like, own it. It's your stuff. You know, trying to tell people who's the boss. I'm the head of this family and all that stuff. Trying to make somebody see reason. When actually, when you say, all I want is you to see reason, what you mean is you want them to see it your way. Trying to use adult power. You may or may not have it, you know. Trying to get people to take sides, you know, where people are trying to get other people to gang up and having a good child in a family and the bad one, all that stuff. Certainly within a youth club setting, around trying to get, you know, people to take sides, or there's the nice youth worker we all like and we'll do what they say, and then we demonise the other one and young people play somewhere in the middle. And making those empty threats. So if you don't do as you're told, you're going to have to do this, this and this. I'm going to count 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4. You know, once you've done that, it doesn't work, does it? I'm going to call the police. No, you're not. You know, young people, if there is something you're going to do, if there is a consequence, it has to happen. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Using emotional blackmail. Oh, you know, I've had a really hard day. It's really difficult for me too. When somebody's angry, they don't really want to hear that. They want to know how it is for you and that they should curb their emotions. It's about, you know, when you feel really, really angry, it's about, we want to help young people. We need to support them to build that emotional literacy, that they can name their emotions. I've done work in secure units, and young people who act, they would tell you, I've got anger problems. Well, actually, they haven't. They've got a right to their anger. They have had a hard time and a difficult time. What they can't do is distinguish between feeling hurt, shamed, and angry. You know, learning to name them is really important. You need to be able to describe things. So sometimes it'll be that you help them by doing that, by saying, I can see you're angry. I can hear you're angry. Are you angry? You know, not in it, both or three, one will do, because otherwise they're going to think you've gone mad. Acknowledging that anger. Yeah, okay, I can see. You don't have to say you agree by saying, I can hear that. I can hear you. You really feel angry about that. No judgment statements. No judgment statements. Okay, and when you feel that anger, what do? Well, then I kick off and I shout and I shriek and I smash stuff up. Okay, and then how do you feel? What happens then? What happens next? Oh, well, I don't feel so good. You know, I feel this or I feel that. Or actually, I don't feel any better at all. So what do? Well, I get really angry and I strop off. And then what happens? So actually, they can start to learn some patterns because you're helping them to see it. That this is what happens. This is how I usually cope. Okay, well, obviously you don't do this with somebody when they're so cross they're going to scream. You know, that's not what anybody wants to hear. But acknowledging their anger, fine when somebody's really angry. I can see you're angry, or you look angry. What's happened? Do you want? Well, how can I help? How can I help you? Do you want to talk about it? Keeping your words few. You know, giving choices when people feel they haven't got any. How we look at this is when something happens. So I got chucked out at the screen, and I know I've got all you lot there, and really, people don't need me to be chucked out at that particular moment. So I tell myself, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. It's all gone wrong. You know, it's just like last time. I can't do this. It's my thoughts. I tell myself something, my feelings, I'm useless. Why didn't I learn a bit more about technology? Why does it always happen to me? It always happens to me. It's not fair. And then I do something. So if we're looking at anger, what often happens with young people, because of all those things I've said, but mainly about the adolescent brain, is you go straight from something happening. So somebody tells you something, says something you don't like. Your thoughts are, they don't like me, I'm unlikable, and you go straight to behaving. You don't actually sit with your feelings and allow them just to be for a minute. Let's have a look. Hang on. Might let me back in. It did this last time actually as well. So if we're trying to help young people move on with this, it's about giving them some tools. So first of all, name it. I feel angry. To find the problem. What is the problem? Listen to them. Check out how they feel. How did you feel when that happened? And when that happened, how did you feel there? So that you can empathise, get to see the problem as they do. It's, as I say, it's not about telling them that you agree with them. Open-ended questions, and look at those verbal and non-verbal messages. But more importantly, what's your own? Because if somebody is getting aerated and cross, be really careful. Apparently, most out of home conflict is caused by that. So think about things like pub fights. It's because people are misreading the signs. Alcohol has also clouded judgments. Lots of noise around. Temperature is high. people move forward, one push can be enough, and you see it scuffle and you think, where did that all come from? That's how it happens. Don't ever say to somebody, oh, I know how you feel. You don't. You can't possibly know how somebody else feels. It's impossible. And we can't assure young people that it's all going to be all right, because it might not be. We don't know any more than them about COVID, do we? We can't say it's going to be okay. So what we want to try and get them to do is self-check. So you do this think, feel, do. Something happens and you think it. But instead of just acting straight on, everybody hates me, I'm useless, I'm a bad person, or they've insulted my dignity, or whatever, is what I'm thinking true? So where's my evidence for that? So yeah, that person might have said something unkind or nasty, but actually, you know, when they wrote something horrible on my Instagram post about, you know, I'm a fat cow or something, is that true? Well, yeah, probably eating a bit too much during lockdown, and yeah, maybe, but I looked okay. I checked that picture over. My mum said I looked all right, and actually, there's no evidence for that. When I've done that, thinking it through, it changes how I feel, because it doesn't trigger those emotions of shame and anger and hurt. I thought they were my friend. It calms the whole thing down. So the outcome is different. And if we can get young people to actually, outside of the situation, look at conflicts, because often you get into patterns and you always have the same arguments. This, by the way, works for arguments you have at home or with partners. And for the people we love most, often we get into, we actually have the same argument every time. So I'll just own that. So when my, was my boyfriend, was my husband, now my ex-husband, the same thing happens. He walks through the door, usually when I've just done the cleaning and I've tidied the floor, and he walks in straight across the floor with his muddy boots on. And to be quite honest, I could cheerfully strike him dead where he stands. It's always had the same response. I could murder him. But actually, it's because what I think is, he doesn't care about me. He doesn't care that I've spent all afternoon doing that cleaning up. I feel that my work is lesser, that it doesn't matter, he doesn't care, he can't love me, because if he loved me, how could he? All of that means that when he comes to the door, I go, get your shoes, or something like that. Obviously, I'm a nice person, I wouldn't do that. But should I do that? I might do that. The outcome's the same. He's outraged and thinks I'm wasting his time. I feel hurt, and we go round in circles. Think about the arguments they have. Chances are they're the same argument, because it's the feelings and the thinking that triggers the argument rather than what's really happened. So if we can put a space in between trigger, you know, think about it, sit with it, then respond, it changes the outcomes, and that's what we want. Positive self-talk, another one. It is an American kind of language, you know, type of thing. And I thought, first of all, when I saw this, yeah, right, that's going to really work, like when you're really angry. But you know what? It does. If it's something like, you know, so I got chucked out of Zoom again. Now, actually, it's not worth getting. I'm doing the positive self-talk. Look, I'm sure Sarah will cope. It's not going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody in this whole time of lockdown. You know, well, some people might even think, great, she's finished early and they'll be off outside in the garden. Other people will just think, oh, that was a nuisance, wasn't it? But it's not the worst thing that's ever happened, and it's not worth getting cross about. Your response, again, you keep calmer. So trying to get young people to think of mantras that work for them, you know, whether that's deep breaths and relax or not. Or, you know, telling yourself, I managed last time, I can do this. You know, I can do this. I can get out of this without losing my temper. I can do it. Doesn't really matter. Just let it go. Let it go. I'm not going to start singing that. Other things you can do, thank goodness you'll be pleased to know, I haven't completely lost it in lockdown. Finger pressing. And you can all try this at this moment. So when you're angry, even when you're not, said about the fight or flight, all that blood rushing around, blood runs to your fists to prepare you to fight somebody or whatever. If you take a deep breath and you clench your fists and then hold your hands out straight, you can feel the tension going. It's really clever. So if you can give people tools, not when they're angry, But this is actually about giving people tips and things. Small piece of blue tack works if you put it up. I'm not allowed to say blue tack, sticky tack, and you squeeze it between your finger and your thumb like that. And you press it as hard as you can, and then you take the pressure off. It does exactly the same thing. So it changes, gives you a physiological change, which prompts the change in your thinking. And that's what you're trying to do, is to put in that think, feel. So I think it, now I'm going to feel something else. Wall push-ups, if you think you're going to hit someone or hit yourself or whatever, use that energy doing push-ups on the wall. And if you count them as you go, you are refocusing your brain on something else, because you can't be counting in your head while you're thinking, you know, awful thoughts and that spiraling of, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him, because you're thinking of something else. Finally, you know, go and find somewhere where you can scream and let it all out. For me, it's putting on music, usually Nirvana. I think I'm stuck in that walk. Or really loud rave music, and stomping across the fields with the dog at breakneck speed. Because I had to find other things, because my coping mechanism was always, I'll go and have a fag. I gave up smoking. And for young people, if they've not been near their cigarettes, it's ways that you've learned to cope. We all have coping mechanisms. They're not always healthy. Finding something else. Giving yourself permission to let out those nasty feelings where you can't hurt yourself. And allowing time afterwards. Remember what I said about coming down off of this emotional slope, to let your body go back to normal. Often young people and adults too, when they've been really, really angry, what they want to do is go and have a sleep, go and have a rest, go and stick your head under the duvet somewhere, go and watch something that's going to take your mind off it. So I'm not saying all those strategies I've chosen are few that I think really work quite well, but they work for me. They might not work for other people. And for young people, I think the important thing is to try, when they're not angry, if we're trying to get them to move beyond just always getting into angry places, is giving them the tools, the skills to try and do something else. Is when they're feeling okay, is to talk about those different strategies and get them to try some out, see what works for them. You know, whether it's having a joke, listening to it, being funny, somebody being funny when you're angry is not always helpful, because it can be seen as being belittling. Other people, they'll watch something that makes them laugh and they love it. Talking to someone seems to come up high every time. And again, somebody like yourselves who can sit there and just say, how can I help? What would help you? Listening, not trying to, oh yeah, but what you should have done is, we're not trying to problem solve. We're trying to listen, hear that, and then ask them, what's that anger? You know, was it anger? What else did you feel underneath? That was the primary emotion. What else did you feel? And then what did you feel? And then what did you feel? So you're giving them the words to use. I like things, but then I was an art teacher. Came into youth work through community art. So I love anything art focused. I like doing anger diaries with young people, where you write down your moods. They don't have to write it. They can draw it for me. Colours. You know, we all see colours differently. If I'm working with a young person and I say to them, well, when I see red, I think of love and warmth. What do you see? And I say, I see anger, or I see whatever. Once I know the different colours that they see, different emotions, then I can ask. I don't have to ask them. They don't have to explain or find those words. They can show me a colour, or they can tell me a colour. I feel red, I feel blue, I feel whatever you feel. And we can take it from there. And what happens just before you, if yellow is your anger, your worst anger, what happens just before that? What colour are you then? Well, I'm blue, I'm hurt. And it's starting to make sense of things. For other people, it's cuddly toys, isn't it? And anything that is around physical contact and having something that works. If it's gaming, I think something that isn't going to get your adrenaline racing too, because otherwise what you're doing is you are mirroring. And if we're back in a youth centre and we're talking about anger, take a tip from all those bouncers that manage all those big clubs. What happens if a fight kicks off? You change the environment. The lights go up, the doors go open, cools people down. You lose the audience, get rid of all those young people that are going to watch you deal with this, and then you look at it. But don't try and do it, you know, in front of everybody else. Okay, and at the end of all of that, because we are now Oh, I'm 4 minutes over time. I'm really sorry, everybody. So I'm going to pull it to an end. You know, you might want to try some yourself, because I think we've been talking about anger, but actually I expect there's quite a few of us that have felt quite a bit of frustration and anxiety about the situation. That's natural too, you know. Anyway, just to show you some of the other stuff that's free and out there, anybody who hasn't listened yet to the Sex Ed Diaries, so this is Brooke, and it is their new offering. It's really good. The person who runs it is a person called Dr. Polly Haste, and so far I think there's been 3 or 4 that have been put. You can get it from iTunes, download it from your normal podcast provider, and she's talking to youth workers and teachers and people who work, Brooke workers. So they've done LGBTQ inclusion, they've done porn, they've done positive relationships, talking about how we can be, you know, working with young people, as well as explaining what the new national curriculum is going to be. It's good. There is loads of stuff out there to help you. I'm going to send this over to Sarah when we finish, so that she can send it out to you. I've put links in. That's my email, no, actually it's my Twitter, but either that or the website. If you want to ask me something, or there's something you think, oh, you didn't cover that, or I want to know a bit more, can either, you know, leave something with Sarah today, or please get in touch with me. I love seeing people from training again, you know, online in the World Wide Web, and especially at the moment, I can almost guarantee you a quick answer because I'm looking for people to talk to. Anyway, thank you. Hopefully it's been useful. As I said, it won't solve the world, but it's given you some of the key bits and pieces to go back and have those conversations and to support young people. Okay, back over to you, Sarah.
So thank you, Vanessa. That was absolutely fantastic. We've got loads of really good comments coming up in the chat as well, saying that they've enjoyed it, but they've had to leave, so they're really sorry. We certainly enjoyed it. Fantastic. Some great feedback, some great questions, some great interaction as well. Just to let you all know, so Vanessa's already said that we are going to be sending that out to you, so we'll get our admin teams to send the presentation out to you guys. Also, we have a couple more of these coming up, the webinars coming up. So we've got one on the 18th of June at 3 o'clock, and that is a youth worker wellbeing collective. And then we've also got another one on the 29th of June at 2 o'clock, and that's about young people and pornography.
That's me. Come and talk porn with me.
Yeah.
Come and talk porn with me.
So that's Vanessa again. So fingers crossed that it doesn't lock you out this time, Vanessa.
I know.
But you styled it out and you handled it well, so it was all good.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks to Sophie.
Sophie gave some really good feedback then. Well done, Sophie, because put you on the spot. So thank you, everyone. That was great. And thank you for joining us, and take care.